Young Carl Rossman, the protagonist of America, is put out of the parental home and sent to America because of his unfortunate sexual mishap with a housemaid who, quote, had seduced him and got herself a child by him, end of quote. Before coition, quote, "Carl, oh my Carl," end of quote, she exclaimed, while he could see nothing at all and felt uncomfortable amid all the warm bedding that she had apparently piled on, especially for his sake. Then she, quote, shook him, listened to his heartbeat, offered him her chest so that he could listen to hers the same way, end of quote. Next, she, quote, groped between his legs in so disgusting a manner that Carl's head and neck came thrashing out from among the pillows, end of quote. Then she, quote, pushed her belly against him several times. He felt she was a part of himself, and that may be why he was overcome by a terrible need, end of quote. This minor copulation is the cause of everything to follow in the novel. Realizing that our destiny is determined by something utterly trivial is depressing. But any revelation of some unexpected triviality is a source of comedy as well. Post coitum omne animal triste. Kafka was the first to describe the comic side of that sadness. The comic side of sex, an idea unacceptable to Puritans and neo-libertines both. I think of D.H. Lawrence, that bard of Eros, that evangelist of coition who, in Lady Chatterley's Lover, tried to rehabilitate sex by making it lyrical. But lyrical sex is even more ridiculous than the lyrical sentimentality of the last century. The erotic gem of America is Brunelda. She fascinated Federico Fellini. For a long time, he dreamed of making a film of America, and in his Intervista, there is a scene that shows the casting for this dream project. A bunch of incredible candidates turn out for the role of Brunelda, women Fellini had picked with the exuberant delight he was known for. But I say it again, that exuberant delight is the same as Kafka's, for Kafka did not suffer for us. He enjoyed himself for us. Brunelda, the former singer, quote, the very frail woman, end of quote, with, quote, the gout in her legs, end of quote. Brunelda with her plump little hands and the double chin, quote, immeasurably fat, end of quote. Brunelda sitting legs apart, quote, with the greatest effort after many tries and frequent pauses to rest, end of quote. Bending over, quote, to tug at her stocking tops, end of quote. Brunelda hitching up her dress and using the hem to dry the weeping Robinson's eyes. Brunelda unable to climb 2 or 3 steps and needing to be carried, a sight that so impresses Robinson that for the rest of his life he will sigh, quote, oh God, how beautiful she was, what a woman, end of quote. Brunelda standing naked in the bathtub, moaning and complaining as Delamarche washes her down. Brunelda lying in that same tub, furiously pounding the water with her fists. Brunelda, whom it takes 2 men 2 hours to get down the stairs and put in a cart, which Carl then pushes across the city to some mysterious place, probably a brothel. Brunelda in this handcart with a shawl covering her up so well that a cop takes her for a cargo of potato sacks. What is new about this portrait of massive ugliness is that it is alluring, morbidly alluring, ridiculously alluring, but still alluring. Brunelda is a monster of sex on the borderline between the repugnant and the exciting, and men's admiring cries are not only comic, they are comic to be sure. Sex is comic. But at the same time, entirely true. It is not surprising that Broad, that romantic worshiper of women, for whom coition was not reality but a, quote, symbol of feeling, end of quote, could see no truth to Brunelda, not the faintest shadow of real experience, but only the description of, quote, the horrible punishments in store for those who do not follow the path of righteousness, end of quote. The finest erotic scene Kafka ever wrote is in the 3rd chapter of The Castle, the act of love between Kay and Frida. Scarcely an hour after seeing that, quote, unprepossessing little blonde, end of quote, for the first time he is embracing her behind the bar, quote, among the beer puddles and the other filth covering the floor, end of quote. Filth, it is inseparable from sex, from its essence. But immediately thereafter, in the same paragraph, Kafka sounds the poetry of sex. Quote, there hours went by, hours of mutual breaths, of mutual heartbeats, hours in which Kay continually had the feeling that he was going astray, or that he was farther inside the strange world than any person before him. in a strange world where the very air had in it no element of his native air, where one must suffocate from strangeness, and where, in the midst of absurd enticements, one could do nothing but keep going astray. The length of the coition turns into a metaphor for a walk beneath the sky of strangeness, and yet that walk is not ugliness. On the contrary, it attracts us, invites us to go on still farther, intoxicates us. It is beauty. A few lines later, quote, he was far too happy to be holding Frida in his hands, too anxiously happy as well, because it seemed to him that if Frida were to leave him, everything he had would leave him, end of quote. So is this love? No, indeed, not love. If a person is banished and dispossessed of everything, then a tiny little woman he hardly knows, embraced in puddles of beer, becomes a whole universe. Love has nothing to do with it. In his Manifesto of Surrealism, André Breton speaks severely about the art of the novel. He complains that the novel is incurably hobbled by mediocrity, by banality, by everything that is contrary to poetry. He mocks its descriptions and its tiresome psychology. This criticism of the novel is immediately followed by praise of dreams. Then he ends by saying, I believe in the eventual fusion of these two states, dream and reality, which are seemingly so contradictory, into a kind of absolute reality, a surreality, if one may so speak. Paradox, the, quote, fusion of dream and reality, end of quote, that the surrealists proclaimed, without actually knowing how to bring it about in a great literary work, had already occurred, and in the very genre they disparaged, in Kafka's novels written in the course of the previous decade. It is very difficult to describe, to define, to give a name to the kind of imagination with which Kafka bewitches us. The, quote, fusion of dream and reality, end of quote, that phrase Kafka, of course, never heard, is illuminating, as in another phrase dear to surrealists, Lautremont's about the beauty and the chance encounter between an umbrella and a sewing machine. The more alien things are from one another, the more magical the light that springs from their contact. I'd like to call it a poetics of surprise, or beauty as perpetual astonishment, or to use the notion of density as a criterion of value. Density of imagination. Density of unexpected encounters. The scene I cited of the coition of Kay and Frida is an example of that dizzying density. The short passage, scarcely a page long, encompasses three completely distinct existential discoveries, the existential triangle of sex, that are stunning in their swift succession: filth, the intoxicating dark beauty of strangeness, and touching, anxious yearning. The whole third chapter is a whirlpool of the unexpected. Within a fairly tight span come, one after the other, the first encounter between Kay and Frida at the end, the extraordinarily realistic dialogue and the seduction which is disguised because of the presence of a third person, Olga, the motif of a hole in the door, a trite motif, but it shifts away from empirical plausibility, through which Kay sees Clam sleeping behind the desk, the crowd of servants dancing with Olga, the surprising cruelty of Frida, who runs them off with a whip, and their surprising fear as they obey her, the innkeeper who arrives as Kay hides by lying flat under the bar, the arrival of Frida, who discovers Kay on the floor and denies his presence to the innkeeper, meanwhile amorously caressing Kay's chest with her foot, the act of love interrupted by the call from Clam, who has awakened outside the door, Frida's astonishingly courageous gesture of shouting to Clam, I'm with the surveyor! And then to top it all off, and here empirical plausibility is completely abandoned, above them on the bar counter sit the two assistants. They were watching the couple the whole time. The two assistants from the castle are probably Kafka's greatest poetic find, the marvel of his fantasy. Their existence is not only infinitely astonishing, it is also packed with meanings. They are a couple of pathetic blackmailers and nuisances. But they also stand for the whole threatening modernity of the castle's universe. They are cops, reporters, paparazzi, agents of the total destruction of private life. They are the innocent clowns who wander across the stage as the drama proceeds. But they are also lecherous voyeurs whose presence imbues the whole novel with the sexual scent of a smutty, Kafkaesquely comic promiscuity. But above all, the invention of these two assistants is like a lever that hoists the story into that realm where everything is at once strangely real and unreal, possible and impossible. Chapter 12, Kay, Frida, and the two assistants camp in a grade school classroom that they have turned into a bedroom. The teacher and the pupils come in just as the incredible menage a quatre are starting their morning toilet. They get dressed behind the blankets hung from the parallel bars, while the children watch, amused, intrigued, curious, voyeurs themselves. It is more than the encounter of an umbrella with a sewing machine. It is the superbly incongruous encounter of two spaces, a grade school classroom with a dubious bedroom. This scene, with its enormous comic poetry, which should head the list in an anthology of modernism in the novel, would have been unthinkable in the pre-Kafka era, totally unthinkable. I stress this in order to make clear the full radical nature of Kafka's aesthetic revolution. I recall a conversation by now 20 years back with Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who told me, quote, "It was Kafka who showed me that it's possible to write another way," end of quote. Another way means breaking through the plausibility barrier, not in order to escape the real world the way the Romantics did, but to apprehend it better, because apprehending the real world is part of the definition of the novel. But how to both apprehend it and at the same time engage in an enchanting game of fantasy? How be rigorous in analyzing the world and at the same time be irresponsibly free at playful reveries? How bring these two incompatible purposes together? Kafka managed to solve this enormous puzzle. He cut a breach in the wall of plausibility, the breach through which many others followed him, each in his own way: Fellini, Marquez, Fuentes, Rushdie, and others. To hell with St. Garda! His castrating shadow has blocked our view of one of the novel's greatest poets of all time.